Friends, this is Pablo with WILDSONS, and I want to welcome you again to the WILDSONS podcast. Today, I want to invite you to join me on a great conversation I had with my friend Bryan Byrd. Bryan is the founder of Bison training, coaching organization for men, and the co-founder of Wild Courage, a beautiful nonprofit organization offering men hope through stories of redemption. But much more importantly, Bryan is the husband to an incredible woman, and he is the father to two amazing wild sons. He is a brother, a close brother to me and to many more. And above all, he is a man who has chosen to say yes to God and follow him on the path to becoming the man, the husband, the father, and the leader that he created him to be. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. My friend, my brother, Bryan Byrd, welcome to the WILDSONS podcast, my brother. How you doing?
Oh, doing good. Thank you so much for having me, Pablo. It's a joy to see you once again. And even though it's digital, we'll take it.
I know, right? Better here than nothing.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me, brother. I almost wish that we did more of this, but at least we have the excuse of the podcast to come online and chat a bit. It's been a while.
Yes. We need to catch up.
Yeah. So, all right. So before we get started on conversations, and I know that we can talk for hours about any given topic, I have a question for you that I'd love to start with. And this is unrehearsed and just throwing, a curveball maybe right at the beginning. The heart, the centrality of the podcast is we're exploring the masculine journey and walking with our brothers out there, with men out there on this path to becoming the men, the husbands, the fathers, the leaders God created us to be. And so starting with that topic of men, masculinity, what is masculinity to you? How, in your own personal words, there's obviously no right or wrong answer, but what comes up when you think about masculinity? What is that? What is being a man to you?
Oh, great question. And for all the listeners, this is on the spot. You didn't give me any warning. But
yeah,
Pablo, masculinity to me, I think it's about design, and it starts in the garden. And what God gave us first, He gave us work, and not to give a theological sermon, but masculinity is made. Us as men are made to do hard things, and good masculinity shows up and provides care when nobody else is designed to do that. You and I, we're designed to provide care to our families, to our sons, to our wives. And there's probably a little extended family there that our reach goes to, our day to day. But then there's the folks in our reach that may need help that only we can bring. And it's hard. You may have to fly to Atlanta to provide a conversation of care for someone who needs it, an addict, someone going through something hard. And masculinity shows up. Masculinity does hard things. Masculinity is the guy in the room who puts himself last and gets humble, starts going to counselors and working on their stuff and their story, their point of origin, so they can become more whole, so they can affect their family, the ones they love the most, and everybody they interact. They're not done. Masculinity is not content with just who they are today. Masculinity really steeps itself in becoming and working on developing the maturity to handle the huge things that God has in the path later on. So masculinity is a learner. Masculinity does hard things. It steps in and provides the care when nobody else can provide it. And I think masculinity is the mirror image of one half of God, the one who comes, the one who saves. And we have a slice of that in our role, in our lane, of who we are as men, brothers, family members, friends. Masculinity says yes, shows up, does the hard things. And, that's a big question, but I really think that the model is, kings lead people to die. Jesus leads people to die, not only to themselves. He set the precedent on the cross. We're supposed to lead people to die. We have to die to ourselves and set the example for others.
Thank you, brother. That we could take any one of those phrases and go so deep. But before we do so, just for the sake of the people around us, I'd love for you to share more about who you are, what you come from, and even if you're willing to do that through the lens of masculinity, a little bit of your story, whatever you feel that is relevant for today. What was your experience of, growing up and where that led you, and then what has happened for you to become the man who can sit down and define masculinity in those terms? Yeah, tell us more about who you are.
You bet. I grew up in Iowa. I was born in 1976. Santa Fe, New Mexico. Parents get divorced. Mom eventually takes me and moves when I'm 1 year old, moves to Iowa, 1,500 miles away from my father, separate. Makes visiting, having a daily life with my father very, very hard. It's a lot
How
of
old were you?
one
Okay,
and a
wow.
half. Yeah, so very young, and separation already hits. And we moved to Iowa, and I grew up in my mom's household. And I see my dad, probably once at Christmas, Thanksgiving, but I really didn't see him consistently until I was able to fly alone. And I think I was 8 or 9 when I got on a flight by myself for the first time from Des Moines, Iowa. I think it was on TWA, for those of you who remember TWA, and before bankruptcy. And I'd fly from Iowa to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where my dad or my grandpa would pick me up. And and the Byrd side of the family was all in New Mexico, Los Alamos, and we'd spend Christmas, Thanksgiving, and probably a week in the summer. So the cadence was about twice a year that I get to see my father, and then I'd come back to Iowa, and that's where I was born and raised, and had a stepdad and a half brother in the home, and but really grew up seeing my father on the weekends per se, not very much, maybe maybe once a quarter, and so it was hard, right? The example was just not available for the care and for the masculinity that I needed to see, and God bless my father and I have a great relationship now. There's been a lot of restoration, so I want to give a caveat. We've talked through our story and our port of origin, but I want to just honor him right now and know that I love him, and he's becoming a great man. He's 77, and he's has a successful marriage, and he's doing ministry in South Carolina, and he's becoming. He's with a great group of guys down there at the barn, Haynes Maxwell, a Wall of the Heart group, and
Come
he's
on.
one of the oldest guys in the room, and he gives away everything he's learned, and so I'm very proud of
Wow.
him. But back in the day when I'm growing up in Iowa, there's a lot of time and space, and not room for the day-to-days. There's not room for the cereal to be poured, and for the chores, and for rhythms of father giving to son. It doesn't exist based on divorce and space and time. And so I grew up in a home with a stepfather. We get along, but we're not that close. There was a lot of absent things that I needed fathering with growing up. Just weren't there. My stepfather worked nights, so we never saw him a whole lot. We were up during the day. He would sleep during the day and work at night. So my biological father's in New Mexico, 1,500 miles away, and my stepdad's working at night. So he is he's gone, and he's separated by work schedule. So basically, my mom took a lot of the load, a lot of the burden. She's a saint,
Yes.
and my brother and I are being raised by her. We live in the farm fields we're in an acreage in Iowa, and I grew up working for farmers and playing all kinds of sports. Learned how to wrestle with pigs, and cleaned a lot of pig shit up. And for those farmers out there listening, we love you. Thanks you for being the backbone of this country. I learned about hard work, taking care of pigs, cattle, sheep, and just working all the time. But there's a vacuum there. My mom couldn't provide everything that I needed as a son, and so masculinity was this enigma. It was a mystery. I didn't get to see it the way I needed, and so my soul started to look for other people, and that was coaches, that was teachers, There's an art teacher by the name of late Mr. Masters, a South Tama County High, who would teach me art and would give me a chance and hold space for me to express emotion, which I didn't know I had, but it'd come out in art. Sometimes I'd be mad and I'd draw skulls and I had no idea why. And it was kind of interesting. And later on, I just knew I just wanted my dad, and I was mad. I was angry. It was coming out. And but there was yeah.
Did
Started
you know
young.
that back then? Did you know that back then, that the anger was like young Brian crying out for dad?
I had no clue. I didn't have the language, didn't have the counsel, didn't have the tool set to look back and say, "Hey, that's a red light. You might want to pay attention to your heart there." And for me growing up, the separation, it was probably more like cover up the heart, cover up the emotions. I used to have this saying, take it in stride and keep on going, get tough, and just bury it
Yeah.
and
Push it down.
push it down. Yeah, let's suppress that thing, because no one wants to feel that. You're a pussy, you're this, you're that. You're work hard and get affirmation through sports. Have your be the first one into the gym, the last one to leave. Let the coaches affirm you and provide what's really a father in the home is supposed to provide. And I was starting to get affirmation and recognition from coaches, and that was kind of the fill in the gap. And some was good and some of it was bad. It wasn't
Right.
all. God comes in really cool ways and had some great coaches, but it wasn't until we're growing up in small town Iowa. It's 2,000 people, and I meet my future wife in high school, Jenny, and she's captain of the cheerleading squad, and I'm captain of the football squad. And people don't believe this, but we were high school sweethearts. It does exist, and it was awesome. And I got to see for the first time what a family looked like with the father in the home. And her dad, Jack, what he give me? He gave me work. He gave me work. He had a few businesses, and one of them was cutting down trees and sawing logs and going out and taking out big timber and cutting them up into pieces of wood and splitting them into firewood, and then of course selling that firewood. Now a lot of times Jack was so good at selling the firewood, he would have it sold before you even go out to get the tree down. So you were under a little bit of a time pressure. He liked to say, "Hey, I got it sold. I need it by noon," and you got to get out there by 6 a.m. to get the wood split, cut, and back into the trailer so we can deliver it. And so he put me to work. And Jack was a World War II vet. He was an older father compared to our peers, and he'd been through the war and been through injuries with his leg, and nothing deterred him. And so he was a man's man, a guy who didn't have excuses. He was masculinity. He would show up and have a limp because of his leg was injured, and never reference it, and never he wouldn't let it bother him. He would show you how to sell things and talk to people and run the chainsaw, and he would limp along. And he was later in life when I got to know him well, and he showed up, and he started to show me what good, loving masculinity, was modeled, and started to really model what it meant to be a man. And my day in, day out, he gave me a great example of how to treat his family and love his family, and kind of filled in the gap where, of course, my biological father, Larry, was he was 1,500 miles away. My stepdad worked at night. And so Jack really became the model of what it meant to be masculine, a father, a husband. He was the guy.
Brian, take me to your inner world. I'm beginning to see the contrast between that younger boy, angry but longing with that pain, right? Below the surface, even below the anger, probably a big dose of pain because of the absence of a masculine figure present and available to him in his daily life. And then the contrast between that and now you being in the presence of this man's man who is paying attention to you and focusing on you and dedicating time and putting you to work and giving you the things that your heart longed for at the time. Paint us a picture of that Brian below the waterline at the level of the heart. What was the message that he was receiving early on? what was his experience underneath that pain and that anger, and then contrast that with the man or the message that you began to receive from Jen's dad, from your father-in-law now.
Oh, absolutely. The message underneath the pain was that I was abandoned. Why did everybody else at school, when they pull up to get dropped off by their sons from their dads, who are driving these F-150s and these big trucks, and give them a hug and send them their backpack and their lunch on the way, and my mom's working and my stepdad's sleeping or working, and I'd get dropped off, and I look around. I said, "There's something wrong. Like, where's the hug? Where?" And underneath it, I couldn't articulate it then, but at the time I looked around and said, "There's something empty here that I'm supposed to have. There's care here. There's modeling. There's parenting. There's fathers." And I remember being so attracted to I'd played a lot of sports, right? Football, basketball, baseball, track. If there was a sport, I wanted to play it, and I thought I was just athletic, but really at the soul level, maybe I wasn't that athletic, but I needed camaraderie, team, family, coaches, strong male influences in my life. And I was always attracted, my friends were always the guys who had the strongest fathers. And I remember going over to a father named Jim Little. He was a teacher. He was a farmer. I was friends with his son, Ben Little. We played sports together. And Jim was a man. Jim invited me into a fishing trip up in Minnesota. And we'd go up there with huge bobbers and chubs, and we'd throw in these big sloughs for muskie and pike. And he taught me how to fish, and we caught these huge 30-inch muskies and or northern pike, and in Minnesota it's a lot of walleye, and he taught me how to fish. And I was like, whoa, this is different. I had an older man teaching me, a father teaching me how to fish. Like, I didn't have that. Before that, it was my mom teaching me how to fish. And so the pain was like, something's not right. The pain was coming from where's the guy that gets to teach me? Where's my biological dad? And that's where the anger came from. And I thought, subconsciously, I started to turn to sports and think, okay, if I perform well enough, if I'm the first one here, if I work hard enough, maybe my father will move from New Mexico to Iowa. Maybe I'll get enough attention. Maybe, and so I'll work as hard as I can, and as many things as I can, and I'll fill in the gap of that pain with work, performance, and maybe he'll move. Maybe he'll come and live close to me. And so that really filled in where that pain was coming from. It was an ache to have Dad with me, dropping me off at school. It wasn't about the sports. It wasn't about the coaches. It was about Dad being close. And I had no idea at the time, but so it created a lot of good things from sports, as we know, right? Camaraderie, team, all the good, there are those pros and cons, but when you realize that you're doing something just to get your attention of your dad, to see if he'd just move, because the need was to be close and to have that male role model with you. It kind of reframed everything.
Do you see me?
Yes.
Do you see me? Do you see that I can, like, look at me? Come, would you tell me? Come, would you show up? Would you be present for my practice? Would you be present for my game? Would you tell me that I have what it takes? Would you just give me the love and the presence and your active participation? Look at all that I'm doing. Can't you see? I can almost see that young boy crying out for that.
Yes, it's interesting. One of the greatest days, we had a very good basketball team, and we ended up making state that year, and we're in the big arena called the Barn in Des Moines, Iowa. If there's listeners there, they know the Barn. And we're in the Barn, and we're playing for third place, and I'm warming up, and I look over, and I'm like, there's my dad. He flew in from New Mexico, and didn't tell me, and showed up, and it was one of the coolest rescues from my heart. Later on, when looking back on it, I'm like, wow. And there he was in the stands, pumping his fist and yelling at coaches on my behalf and telling them to let me shoot more, and not afraid to, fight for his son. And it was such a fun memory, a redeeming memory, that my father would fly to see me 1,500 miles and not tell me. This is 98 or so. And, flights were expensive, and sometimes seasons were without money, and so he would have to save a lot. He was on a government salary, and it was pretty limited, and he did it. And I always remember that, and it was a pretty special time.
Wow. Yeah. And then you began to experience, a little later than Jen's dad and his influence in you and him putting you to work. And so what was now the message that you were receiving? There was something that clearly touched your heart, that your heart began to blossom and thrive as a man in that context with, in the presence of these men.
Yeah, Pablo, there's a particular story that kind of highlights what that started to reveal in my heart. And it was a course where we were put to work, and I was out. Jack sent me out to this big tree had fallen on a fence, and I had, I had no idea how to take a chain, roll it around a log, pull it off the fence. No one showed me, so but Jack was kind of, he was old school. He's like, "Hey, figure this out. Here's the keys. Here's the gas. You got 2 chainsaws. We got gas and oil in them. And back the truck. You've run a chainsaw before, right?" I had a little bit for him, so I was pretty much still a rookie. I was a green stick, and he said, "Get in there and go get this tree off this fence. I got a customer that already sold the wood to." Typical fashion, something like that. And then, and it happened to be Christmas Day, Christmas morning, about 8:00.
Wow.
And of course, yeah. So we got a sidebar. 6:00 that night, we have a family dinner that I'm invited to, and we're in college, and he's like, "I know we'll see you at dinner tonight, kid, for Christmas dinner." I'm like, "Okay." So I take the keys, I run out to take this tree off this fence, and never done it before, and I get the saws going, and lo and behold. I knew not to hit the ice. There's a lot of snow and ice covered this log, and what I should have done is just hooked the chain up and pulled it off and rolled it, so I'm not going to run my blade into a bunch of snow and ice. And first thing I do, I fire it up, first chainsaw, start cutting through, and I hit the ice. The blade's dull.
Of course you did.
And I start to get that nervous sweat, like, oh, what if I let him down? Oh, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? And so I get the other saw out, and of course I don't hook up the chain. I don't even know what the chain was. I didn't realize I had one at the time. I wasn't paying attention, typical young kid. And I take the other saw out, and I start it up, and I do the same thing. I start going through the wood, and I hit the ice again. Wow. Now I got 2 saws. Chains need to be sharpened. I'm not going to get this wood off this fence. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm really sweating now. I'm getting nervous, and I'm starting to feel inside like I'm going to let Jack down. I'm going to...
Again, if love, if attention, if validation is coming by way of performance, then everything is on the line right now.
Oh, everything. And but besides the fact that I'm dating my future wife, and this is, it's kind of a trial to make sure I qualify as a future husband. And so I drive back, and I stop by this pasture, and I see this huge, it's where Jack's sons and other sons-in-laws have taken wood off the pasture and have made a lot of wood and sold a lot of firewood out of there. And I look over and I see this huge stump. This stump is, it's just huge. It's probably 250, 300 pounds. It's ridiculous. And at the time I was getting ready to go play college football, and I was pretty strong. And I thought, boy, I better do something because I just broke 2 saws, and I don't have any wood in the back of this truck. So I go over, and I had this flatbed truck, and I deadlift this stump, 2 of them actually. I deadlift 2 of the largest stumps that we've ever seen. They've never come out of that pasture into the back of the truck. So I had something to pull back with me. So I drive about 15 miles back to the yard, and he's looking around. He's like, and he's standing on this wooden deck that's kind of next to where the truck rides up, and so he can look right in the back of the truck, and because he's on the deck, and I'm like, and he looks down with a little confused face. He says, "Well, that's not the tree, but how'd you get those stumps in there? We've been trying to get those for years." He said, "Well," it was a long story, so I explained the story to him. He kind of has this confused look, and he's like, "Okay, well, go split those." So I go split those stumps, and we sell that wood, and And he goes, "Why those saws are all jacked up, huh?" And I'd explained to him how I hit the ice, and he did not approve of that activity. But it kind of all worked out, and I didn't feel that great. And I was like, "Oh well, at least I got these two stumps." And fast forward to the dinner, and it's like 6 o'clock Christmas evening. We're all washed up, showered up, and we had some great food, and we're getting ready to open presents, and the whole family's there. Jason, my brother-in-law, and Jim, my other brother-in-law, who've all worked for Jack, cutting trees down, and we're all kind of sitting in these lazy boys in these couches, and Jack used to sit with his paper right over, covering his eyes, and he'd look up and look back and read the paper and just converse and talk to us, and at some point, before this, it was just Jim and Jason and Jack and I. At some point, he kind of looks over his paper, and he looks at Jason, he looks at Jim, and looks at me. He says, "Well, boys, Byrd did something that no one else could have so far." And everybody looks up. These are very accomplished woodsmen. Jim and Jason cut a lot of trees down for Jack and made him a lot of money, and just grew up really running saws. They could run it pretty. They could, just like you and I could butter toast. They could run saws. They were very accomplished guys. And he goes, "The Birdman loaded those two stumps up that nobody else could get. He got him in here. Could you believe that? He's strong. He's the man. He got him up and did a great job." And of course, Jim and Jason don't know that I doled two saws out and I had this failure of experience. But in that moment, Jack said, "You're strong." He said, in front of his other sons, "You got what it takes." He said, "You know what you're doing." He provided affirmation, and he said, "You're doing a good job," in front of the guys that matter the most in the family.
And he didn't mention the two saws in front of them. He didn't mention the part that you were concerned about. He actually focused on, this is this man. I see you, and I see that you have what it takes. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. It was a defining story, a pillar of a rescue. And Jack did that for a lot of us. But especially for me in that time, he just said, "You got it." And I took confidence away from that interaction at Christmas dinner for the rest of my life. And Jack ended up, passing away, and later on, a few years later. And he's a special, special man, and he's very missed. But what he did in that moment was provide a confidence and an affirmation and an initiation that I couldn't even explain until years later. And forever grateful, forever.
Oh. What a beautiful story. Bryan, we met later, many years after that. I want to say maybe close to 10 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. And we've been doing life taking parallel paths, but both of us going through a journey of both restoration and initiation as men, in the company of many others, brothers like Jay Heck and Nathan and Rick Hinant and Morgan and a lot of great friends. What brought you into this journey? I want to talk. So when we talk about masculinity, the words that you described, I could almost feel my heart jumping up. Like, yes, that is what masculinity is, and that's the kind of man that I want to be. What we see, though, in culture, what we see in church, what we see in media is something different. And I describe that as broken masculinity. There is this topic going around of toxic masculinity that, to be honest, just pisses me off, because what people are almost labeling masculinity as something wrong, when instead, what I firmly believe, and I think that you probably do too, is masculinity is beautiful. It's spectacular because it's a reflection of who God is. And so is femininity, obviously. And masculinity is good at its core, but something has gone wrong. And masculinity is broken for the most part. What we see out there in church, in media, is it's a broken masculinity, but then there is a beautiful opportunity to go on a journey of restoring that, to restoring the masculine heart, so that it can come back to be the beauty that it is, the example of strength and courage and sacrifice that you've been describing. How was that journey for you? What happened? What triggered that in you? What happened in your story that led you to be willing to open your heart up for a journey of healing, restoration, transformation, initiation like you have?
Oh yeah. Well, the first one, as I mentioned, Jack passed away, and that was a huge hole for the family and for my heart as well. And it's hard to fill that. It's easy to slam a few beers and medicate the pain, and then you wake up with a headache and and the pain's still there. And I didn't have a problem with alcohol per se, but only God could fill that hole. And
what was, say more about the pain? Obviously, losing someone that you love is something really painful, and we are not designed for that, clearly. But there was something deeper. What was the message, I guess, that you received as he passed?
Yeah, as he passed, it was like, oh, here we go again. I didn't have the time and space with my biological father was built in, was wounding, didn't have him day to day. And then here comes a great man who believes in me, and then he gets ripped away. So I think in the years past, I'd call it as a double abandonment, where I just had this double wound of my biological father and now Jack, and my heroes are felt like they just get taken away. And then so the pain was just really tied to an assumption that all good men in my life are going to get taken away. Where it was a scarcity mindset and with lack, and I didn't know about wait a minute, there's an abundant God we can invite into our pain, who can bring abundant resources, who shows up again and again and again. Like I didn't even wait, you're kidding. Like, it's got to be a joke, right? Because so far I've learned that just doesn't take place. Those guys they're gone.
And what I'm hearing you say in that is you're contrasting your experience of men and father figures, with your experience of God at the time. Like you're operating, you said it, from a place of scarcity. There is not for me, right? Dad leaves, and my father-in-law is absent because he works at night. And then my hero, and the one who has been sort of that, whether you may not have had the language at the time, but he was the image of a good father to you, of the father to you, and now he's gone. And so did your story with father help create a picture of who God is, who God was to you?
Oh, 100%. He's there. He's available, but at a distance, maybe at a condition, incomplete, like kind of there and offering, but I can't quite see over the hill. I can't quite see his face. I can't quite. Where's the intimacy? How do I access 100%? It was kind of, it was in part.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the pain leads you to what? So how did you cope with that pain of your father-in-law's loss?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just getting to work, start climbing the ladder. I was in an enforcement vocation, a law enforcement related job, and you could get as many shifts as you wanted, and we just kept piling them on because I thought that I'm just gonna make them proud, and I'm gonna keep earning in the same way I thought I could perform and get my father to pay attention, to maybe move to Iowa when I was young. Now I just took that into another level with career, and let's go climb the chain of promotion, and let's go earn, and let's accomplish with accomplishments and badges and the attaboys and pats on the back, and maybe God or maybe will notice me that way because I'll perform enough and I'll accomplish enough, and I didn't have any idea that's kind of I could crash on top of that performance world as well, and I just thought I could earn it, and let's see. And so, yeah, there's a gap in there where I needed older men. Like I had to get humble. I had to I had to, I didn't really crash per se, but I had to like realize that I didn't, like the God shows up through a community of men in my life most of the time. And most of the time, Pablo, you have a slice, and Jay has a slice, and my boys around here have a slice of the Father. And it's in community where the Father shows up as a whole. And so I went Mount Hermon, California. I think it was 2012. You were there. We didn't know
It
each
was
other.
February of 2013,
Ah,
and I was there.
we we may have rubbed elbows at some point, but we didn't know it. We intersected,
Wow.
but we didn't know it per se.
Wow.
And we're in Mount Hermon, California, at a Wild at Heart boot camp, and I'm in the sequoias, and I just have this prayer time with God and this epiphany. And Morgan's talking about sonship, and I'm like, I need to find. I don't have any older guys. I need to get humble. I was like, I cannot just perform and get the love that I need, and then love my wife and kids at the time the way they need to be loved. Like I have a missing piece here, and so we go get radically is a radical mountaintop experience at Mount Hermon, not only in the sequoia trees, but just with the Wild at Heart crew. Morgan
Mhm.
teaches on sonship. I walk out of there. Literally, I got to tell one story from that camp. Literally, a good friend of ours, Kevin Riggy, he's up there. He gets so radically, touched by John, the late Craig McConnell, of course, and Morgan are teaching. And I mean, we're a bunch of, imagine 500 guys for the listeners getting so radically touched by God that, I mean, they covered the stained glass of that place up with black cloths. There was no religion in that room. It was a radical invitation to go after God's heart. And at one point, I look over on the last day, after 4 days of invitation, Kevin Riggy's there with a big sword, and he goes up to the stump. Wild at Heart's got these stumps and these swords that are stuck in it for mostly for the environment, the culture is like, oh, swords, and you're kind of this masculine environment. He says, heck with it. We're going to go worship. He goes up on stage, grabs the sword out of the stump and starts waving it around. He's so pumped up. And I thought, man, these are my guys.
I
and
have found my people.
sword wavers, guys who grab swords out of stumps during worship services. This is the church I want to go to. And to say it was a radical transformation, that's just one slice of what happened that weekend. And I know you have your
And
stories too.
I want to
And
reinforce that, Brian, because for me that same weekend marked it was an incredible pivotal moment in my life centered around the same idea. Just and it sounds simple, but it's radical. It is that number one, that God as a father is present and is available,
mm,
and He desires to come and to be involved in our daily lives as a good, active father. That is not just this concept of God or these theology principles that I get to
yeah,
rehearse on Sunday morning. That there's an availability of someone, like that person that you longed for your entire life, right? That longing for dad to fly in from New Mexico and be present at my game, that can become a practical reality on a daily basis. That we can encounter a father who is present daily, who can speak to us daily, who can heal and comfort and reinterpret circumstances and provide counsel and guidance and initiation and validation and his strength and his coaching and his leading on a daily basis. That is a radical concept because, for the people who don't believe in God, like, yeah, we're completely nuts. But I want to believe that at least 90% of Christians out there don't live with a reality of a father like that, right?
yes,
There is a theology of God, but in a practical way, they're agnostics because they have not come to experience the Father in that way. And you and I did for the first time at that weekend. And I think that was one of the key things that changed my life and that I think changed yours is if this is true and I can come back home and live with this category in a daily life, I can experience life as a son of an active and present father. This will change my life completely. If I can receive
forever.
that love and validation and initiation, and then from the overflow of that love, I can come and love my wife and my children and guide them on the same path that he is guiding me, everything changes. My life reorients completely. And the Bryan
Co-
that I know is a Bryan that walks and lives like that.
Completely. So well said, Pablo. And I came out of that weekend mountaintop experience. God talking, I'm hearing. That was God.
Mm,
Whoa. Validation.
mm,
Uh,
mhm,
you got what it takes, like from Him. Like what? And I get home, and the reentry is like, oh no, now what
mm,
do I do? And God just started talking to me. He's like, find the guys, the older guys you need in your life. Get back in the game. And so I'm like, all right, God, I'm going to test you out. I'm like,
mhm,
I type in, I swear to God, right here, I go to Google. It's a little bit of a kind of a big company that helps people find information. And I type in uh, Christian men leader Boise return. Poof. I'm like,
mm,
fine. And I list down all these leaders, and I'm like, fine. I'm going to start emailing people. I look up. I start. I email like 4 or 5 guys that are like Christian male leaders that Google says they should be.
mhm,
Google decides who's in my life, and I'm like, all right, God, return. And I send these emails off, and one of them got back to me. Uh, oh man, a great man named Skip Hall. Skip was a former Boise State coach, former Washington Husky coach, won the Rose Bowl back in the day, and he's a great pillar of masculine leadership here in the Valley. And he gets back and says, "Meet me for breakfast." And I'm like, "What? You're gonna?" I just Google a guy's name, and you want to meet me for breakfast? Okay, return.
mm,
I meet him for breakfast. And he listens to my story, and I share all what's going on. He says, "Bryan, I used to lead a Wild Heart group of 300 men in Arizona. You're made for this. God loves you. You need to meet another guy named John Strain." I'm like, John Strain? Okay. Friday morning, men's group, 7 o'clock. You be there at this coffee shop every Friday. This is like 15 years or 12 years ago, 13 years ago. Okay. So I start showing up, and John becomes a leader of this small group. They're talking about the heart. They're talking about scripture, what it means to be a man, and masculinity. And I started going, and I don't say much. I just listen. And all these guys most of them are retired, they're probably in their 60s. Some are my age, and I'm the youngest guy there. And I just sit on my hands. I
mm,
don't say anything. I just listen for months,
mm,
every Friday morning. And these guys are just pouring wisdom into me. And it turns out John has raised 4 sons, and John's initiated 4 sons and what it means to be a follower of God, and what's healthy masculinity look like. And John's sons are pilots and guides and businessmen, and they're great. And I'm like, what?
mm,
And within a 2-week period, 14 days, God's delivered a guy answers an email, a random email from a stranger. B, I get invited into a small group, into a relationship with a father of 4
mm,
boys, and a guy who's a hero in the faith, who's been on my podcast, and he's just a guy I go to with my questions. How do I follow God? X. How do I do this? How to, like, all of a sudden I have spiritual mentors and father. In 14 days, I'm sitting at the feet of giants, and I had this radical, practical interaction with God, because I said, "All right, God, I want to ask, are you gonna?" And He answered. And now I got a cohort of leaders in my life that I can pull on, and a slice of the Father in each of them, and community where God can show up in a whole. And for 15 years we've been friends, and just a stalwart, a pillar of a father and a man, and a spiritual leader. And John leads has led several ministries out here, Campus Crusade for Christ, and he has his own search ministries. And then he recently broke off with his own leads a ministry called You Gotta Ask, and now he wrote a book called You Gotta Listen. And it's all about
mm,
practically ways of relationally evangelizing, telling people about Jesus, your story, and hearing from God, and how to hear
mm,
from God, and how to listen to God, and how to walk with God. And it's been just been a lifeline to guys like me who grew up with a little I've had to break off scarcity in my story,
Mm-hmm.
where the father's been a long ways away, spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
physically, and mentally, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and he's just reoriented. He's busted all the models, everything I grew up with, all the generational memories of growing up at another holiday, not at my dad's, not my biological dad's, being separated, to now come full forth. I got John and Skip and these old guys, these older veterans who've been there, done that, and they're available. What do you mean they want to
Mm-hmm.
have coffee with me? They want to share their
Mm-hmm.
lives and talk about the sons they raised and how they did it and the mistakes they made. They want to bare their souls. Really? And
Mm-hmm.
that happened in such a short amount of time. I was just flooded with veterans who could help. It was like God delivered masculinity in the right way at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my lack of humility, I said, I'm going to test God. Really? Here he comes with a dump truck of masculine men and resources and people to surround you with what you need at that time, right
Wow.
now, right here.
Right, such an important story because I think your story is the story of many men. The circumstances may be different, but I think one of the common themes that I see as we work with men, have worked with men all these years, is this fundamental belief that life is up to me, that I'm on my own, that no one is for me, and if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it for me. And the concept again of a father, if of God as a father, if God is in their lives at all, is distant. It's probably this old guy on a judgment seat waiting for me to blow it so that he can condemn me, so that he can point fingers at me. It's a wrong perception of who God is as a father. But from that weekend, that radical reorientation of who the father is, and I see you moving from that place of scarcity, that message that there is not fathering for me, there is not masculine presence for me, to a place of curiosity. What if this is wrong? What if the men are out there and I dare do what God is telling me to do, to reach out to all the men in my community, the older men who can provide counsel? That's
Yes.
risky, right? For someone who has been on the receiving end of silence and absence, to reach out and allow the heart to just come out in that place of desire. And would you be willing to meet me with me? Would you be willing to have a conversation with me? It's super risky, but you did it. And what you found is that there is no scarcity of fathering from God to you, but an abundance of fathering through a collection of remarkable men who have made a significant impact in your life over the years. Is that right?
Oh, that's right. That's right. So much so, Pablo. We've been having, sometimes we have, we do some ministry out here with a group called Wild Courage that I help start. And it's our nonprofit where we do fires and we do many things like Wild Sons, and we seek to help give hope to the hopeless man. And we have retreats. And John ended up coming to one of my retreats last year.
Mm,
And God is so good. And John came and just how God works sometimes is radical. And
mhm.
it is full of miracles. People want to say, "Oh, miracles don't happen anymore." Oh, they do every day. We just got to open our eyes. And just a real pragmatic celebration of miracles is God just he wanted me to share. He wanted me to bring a knife and to give it away. I had no idea who to give it to. I said okay. So I got this pretty special knife. It's a double bladed and it folds open and it's masculine and it's something that operators and controllers in the armed services would wear and use practically to defend our freedom, to defeat people
Mhm.
like ISIS, and to it's a tool of the belt that they all carry. And I'm supposed to give it away. Dang it. I love that knife. But at the same time, okay, God, I'm going to give this away. Why is this? Why are you hitting me with this? Why are you talking to me this way? What? This is mysterious. This is mysterious.
Mm.
And I'm still going to step in to give this knife away. Well, John comes, and the first night, he gets to share a little bit, and I say, John, stand up. And John gets to stand up. I said, 15 years ago,
Mm.
you met with me. And we're in a company of men, about 25 guys in a small retreat, and I go on for 15 minutes to tell every guy what John meant to me by meeting with me, inviting me into his world to draft. I got to listen to how he raised his 4 sons because I have 2 sons of my own. And I'm not an expert, and I'm making mistakes, and I'm hurting their hearts. I need help. And John was there to point the way, to point the direction, to tell me it's going to be okay, to say it's okay to make mistakes, clean it up, make an adjustment. And I got to share that in front of everybody. Said, John helped me raise my boys. John has been a pillar of spiritual growth to not only me, but many. And this knife symbolizes the dangerous weapon that he is. And when he carries it, this is just a token of remembrance of who God views him to be in the kingdom. He's dangerous for good. And I hand him this knife, and it was a very meaningful, not only to me giving it, but to him. And a long story made short, in his story, he had some things that were stolen from him. And one of them had to be a gun, and one of them had to be a knife. And they were taken from him from his closet when he was young. And so me giving him this knife was just God saying, no, I remember you. Here's it back. Here's a return on the things that were stolen. It was an analogy in the time of the retreat, but a much bigger spiritual deposit the Father was making for John. And I didn't know his story about the knife and that it had been stolen when he was young. And by me giving it back, it just fulfilled and filled a hole that he was carrying of pain. And God was healing with that gift. And that's just one example of taking a risk that you can hear from the Father that he provides every day. Get your eyes open because miracles are about ready to happen.
Come on. Bryan, I'm hearing the story of a boy longing for a father, finding, or at least going into performance and particularly into sports as a means to call the attention of the absent father that he longed for. The story of a man who used performance as the means to try to receive the love, the validation, the initiation that he longed for. A man who encountered a father and began to be loved and validated and initiated by a loving father who adores him. And you have become now the father that you longed to have. And now you have 2 amazing boys. And I'd love to, if you're willing, to share a little bit of their experience of sports, of football particularly, which was really important for you in you growing up. But in hearing your stories and in walking and doing life with you, I see their motive is different than yours was all these years ago.
100%. Yeah, 100%, Pablo. Football has been a real big deal. I played college football at Ellsworth Community College. If there's anybody out there at ECC, shout out. It was a big deal for me I was all-state football player in high school, and being on that team, playing for championships was life-changing. It was confidence building. You're part of something that people can't take away. And there's a lot of good. But like you said, I was also performing. I was trying to perform for a father's love, if you want to boil it all down. But at the same time, God uses football. God uses our story and hard things and getting beat up and getting back on our feet, how to come back from losses and all kinds of good things from sports. And my boys both play. To be specific, my oldest said, football's not hard enough. I'm going to play rugby. Who needs pads? And so he raised the game. My youngest, he's in the middle of a high school career now, and he's 6'5", 215 pounds. And so he's a handful. He thinks he can beat dad up right now, but I still can hold my own against him, but it's getting tougher. But, sports has been very important in our lives. And I used to coach club sports with my boys. And we have a saying, I guess, that, in our worlds, we've talked about a lot, that let our ceilings, let Bryan Byrd's ceilings be my kids' floors. Let all my experience, all my things I've been through, the lack of love, the pain, help my walk with God be a floor which my boys can stand on to go to levels I could never achieve. Let me give everything I've learned away so they can stand on my ceiling. Let them be their floor so they can release into a freedom, a grace, a walk with God that I thought was impossible. Let them change the world from my ceiling. Let them stand on my shoulders. And I say that because the relationship with sports has been very different in our household. I love watching them play. I love watching them perform. They're both very good. Calvin has been in 3 state championships in rugby because he thought he didn't need pads, and he won one of them as a sophomore. And he's had some outstanding games and drama, ups and downs. But at the end of the day, I think he'd tell you this. It'd be fun to ask him. But he doesn't need to win for me to love him. There's not a space continuum. There's not a gap where I need to travel to go see him. Right now he's in college and he's in a bonus year staying with us. So I get one more semester with him at home. And it's the best. It's the best. Now I need to release him, obviously, and we will. But to have one more bonus semester to watch him play and learn, it's treasure. I never had that. So when I say let this ceiling be his floor, one more semester, you can do it, bud. I'm going to be in this corner encouraging no matter what. And it doesn't have to win a state championship. It doesn't have to start every single game. But the things we talk about most now is the process. I said, hey, if winning is a product of the process of showing up heroically in consistency. Do you go to your practices every day? Do you go when you're sick? Do you go when you're hurt? Do you go when you're tired? Do you go when all the excuses that are tempting you to have you feel better about yourself, because that's all they do most of the time. Do you fight those off and do you go show up? We're learning about the process, boys. It's the process. And if you engage the process to show up heroically, wins will come. You'll still lose sometimes, but wins will come because a lot of people aren't showing up anymore. And so our discussion and what I didn't have growing up is this discussion is the process is way more important than the end. The journey is the goal. Like, get on, show up, and you will get there. But thinking that you have to win to earn performance, to earn the Father's love, thinking that you have to perform to get the Father's love, no. I'm going to be side by side. And here's a great example, Pablo, I had my kids in club wrestling in 2nd and 3rd grade in this wrestling club called the Bull Catcher. And most of these kids were 3-time Reno world champions, and they traveled a lot, and wrestling was their life. They were all in, and they were very, very, very good. And I just kind of wanted my kids to get tough. They wanted to start them out in wrestling, and a lot of guys start with jiu-jitsu, so they learn how to handle pressure, be in some chokehold, and know that they're not going to die, and they can figure their way out and to learn confidence. And so at one point, Calvin is they call it the nail drill, where you're surrounded by 3, you have like 4 guys, and you just keep going in, jumping in, and every time you get a new guy, if someone pins you, if you lose, you stay in, and a new guy comes in, and a new guy comes in, they pin you, you still stay in. So somehow my son Calvin ends up with 3 like world champions in like 3rd grade, 4th grade. And these kids actually traveled to Reno and won the worlds, and they come back and he's in there just getting mopped and getting put in halves and singles and taken down and carries, and he's just getting beat up. And for 15 minutes he takes it, and he gets up off the mat kind of wobbly, and he's young, and I'm like, wow, that was awesome. He's crying, of course, because what do young boys do when they lose when they're young? They cry. And I'm like, how am I going to handle this? And so I put my arm around him, and we walk outside the gym when the practice is over, because I was at the practice, and I give him a hug, and I look him right in the eyes, and we're right on the road where the dotted line is, walking to our car, and I said, Calvin, you see this road? He says, there's no other road I'd rather be on than right here with you. And what you just went through, you just got beat up by 3 of these champions. God, you got what it takes, Cal. This is, and don't worry, these losses don't last forever. You keep showing up. These will change. But I love you just the way you're at right here. And there's no place I'd rather be than looking in your eyes in the middle of you getting beat up. Let's go. Put my arm around him. We walk to him, and there's just something about being able to affirm your kids in the middle of pain, physical pain, spiritual pain, that I never got. I never had. Again, let our ceilings be their floors. What we got to offer things that we didn't have. Are you kidding, God? You can lead us in this. You can teach me how to love when I didn't get loved in this area. It's a miracle. And with my kids in sports, it's not about where they finish. It's about the sport is the process. And we are practicing to reign. We are practicing for the call of God in their lives in the future. And there's going to be mistakes, and there's going to be all kinds of excuses. And we're learning to walk in it and trust in Him through it, and let Him reveal things we need to work on, and use the process as just embrace it. And that's kind of where we've been sitting from.
Wow. I can almost see the boy in me who right now, through the current circumstances of life, may feel like I've been beat by 3 wrestling champions. And what I'm allowing myself to do through your words, Bryan, is could I open my heart to the possibility of God speaking those words right here to me? That there is no place He'd rather be than on this road with me. That even though it feels like I'm being beat by 3 wrestling champions, I am showing up. And that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And that if I keep showing up and focusing on the journey and on the process, not on the outcome, eventually the wins will come. But that I can experience God right here where I am, His company, His love, His help, His training, His initiation, His validation, as a father to the boy in me. I think that this is where we need to end.
Yeah.
Because I think that our listeners, our viewers, in some area of their lives are also feeling like there are 3 wrestling champions beating the crap out of them. And I want them to hear that they are not blowing it. That they're not a failure. And that in that very place they are worthy of love, they are worthy of belonging, and they are worthy of a father who wants to come and guide them through the journey of becoming all that they were meant to be. Bri, before we wrap up, one last thing that I'd like to ask you is where can we find more about you, what you're doing, from the overflow of that father's heart that you have for your boys? You're helping others like you have been helped in the past. You are now that John who was there for you for 15 years. You are now that John to many. For men out there who want to know more about you, where do they go? What are you up to?
Absolutely. Well, I got this hat on here. My latest endeavor. It's called Iron Bison Training. And currently, we exist to help men's fitness mindset and their walk with God. And we have a podcast that's going. You can search Iron Bison Training on YouTube. And we're just getting going. And we're going to be a resource for the many in this area. And that's the best place to go right now, is that podcast. And but we'll be expanding in the future to offer counsel, life coaching, training, and walk with God in group settings. And that's one. The second one is a nonprofit I help lead called Wild Courage. And much like WILDSONS, we exist to give hope to the hopeless men and reintegrate and find wholeness through sharing of story. And we camp out around men's stories digitally and physically in a barn in Emmett, Idaho, where we have a great exchange, where we create safe places where guys can come and share their story and also hear other stories. And out of that comes great hope, because you're not alone. We're not alone. WILDSONS is not alone. Wild Courage, Iron Bison Training is not alone. There's a community of men that carry the story. They carry the story of being sons. Jay, heck, we love you. It's another one, being sons. But we carry a story that we actually are sons of God who can receive, who can hear, who can walk, and who can provide ceilings, or who our ceilings are our kids' floors. We can give the generation a place to step on. And so Wild Courage, if people want to find out more about fires and what we're doing there, wildcourage.life is strong and going. Iron Bison training for those who would like a little more boost in their fitness mindset and their walk with God. We do that. Check out the podcast. But Pablo, it's been just an absolute honor. There's one thing I want to say is, guys, there's an end to this story, my story you heard, that's fantastic. My father, who was away from me for 1,500 miles for most of my life, has been married for over a decade successfully. 77, he's the oldest member. He leads a thing called Oak Initiative in Fort Mill, South Carolina, where he's affecting politics for good and for change with conservative family values. He's the oldest member of his Wallet Heart group, and he gives away all the lessons he's learned in a barn down in South Carolina. He's part of several ministries at Morning Star, and he's thriving. And he's 77. And I grew up, it was tough. We heard a lot about my story, but there's a redemption that's possible when you walk with God. And right now we're sitting with my father, me, my sons. We're like 3 generations of men that are changing the generational line, changing the curse for blessing, and on this journey. And if we can do it, if God can redeem my line, he can redeem yours.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for being the man that you are. And I hope that you will join me again on another episode of the podcast very soon.
Would love to. Thank you so much, Pablo. It's been a pleasure.
You got it, brother. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the WILDSONS podcast. And if you did, I want to invite you to subscribe to it and to share it with anyone in your world that you think could benefit from it. And also to visit us at wildsons.com to learn more about our online workshops and our weekend retreats and events, and to subscribe to WILDSONS Weekly, our free newsletter for those who want to become the men, the husbands, the fathers, the leaders God created them to be. See you next time.